I want to say about maybe a couple of months ago, right? I got into it with a manager. Well, I don't want to mention which gym it is, but let's just say that it's a fitness gym that has a sauna, right? Not necessarily with a manager, but probably one of the patrons. They were sort of complaining that I was shadow boxing in the sauna, and I'm like thinking, how weird is it that that's a problem for some people, considering that it's not really within their space, or at least within their perception of space, or whatever that may be. Nonetheless, right, that's not really the most important aspect of why I'm bringing this up. So the training method of training in a hot sauna, I think, is extremely underrated, especially in intense heat. Well, why? Because if you train under these conditions, what it's going to do is increase your O2 max levels in your lung capacity, which in turn attributes to having higher cardio in a fight, having more stamina, and being able to withstand a higher level of pace and a higher level of volume, which, by the way, brings into the story with Dricus, right? That's exactly what Dricus was able to do when he was implementing the high volume and the high rate that he was going at. So a little context, understanding this, right? He trains out in South Africa where it's of high elevation, and not only that, his gym, he chooses to turn up the heat, and in more ways than one, even one of his coaches uses a taser to add more heightened intensity and heightened awareness into the techniques, into what he is trying to apply. Now, the controversy behind Dricus, understanding this, is his technique, right? A lot of people criticize it for various reasons. And one of the reasons why they criticize his technique is because they, quite frankly, just don't understand it. And on top of that, on top of not understanding it, they don't understand his level of fitness. So in other words, when you train in high intensity heat, in high elevation at all times, and although there are studies that suggest it's better to live on high elevation and train in sea level, but that's neither here or there. That right there is a scientific debate amongst sports scientists in whatever findings and new research they could find regarding that subject. But the reason why he looks quote-unquote sloppy in the way that he throws punches, not in a traditional way like, let's say, a boxer would have very straight punches or very technical punches. In fact, a lot of the memes that have came out after the weekend's fights was really him in really vulnerable positions of looking like he's looping shots or making it look like he doesn't know what he's doing or anything like that. But that couldn't be further from the truth. What I think it is that his quote-unquote technical deficiency, I think, is also predicated on the reality of how he trains. And what exactly is that? Well, it's like this, right? Understand that when you are training in high intensity and high heat, on top of high elevation, it's going to be very difficult for you to look crisp as you would, let's say, in the first round or something like that. Primarily because you got to understand that when you are fatigued, or when you're building up lactic acid in your arms or in your legs as the fight goes on, or as the pressure mounts, you're not going to look the same as you would in round one. Now, in round one, if you notice the way that Izzy was throwing his punches and kicks, it was very crisp, right? Very straight and very technical. It was very to the point, and not only that, very technical, and it looked like he had been doing it for a long time. Not only that, it looked like it was absolutely second nature for him to implement these shots, right? Because you got to remember, he's a K1 level kickboxer, right? And as a result of that, of course, he's going to look like the much more technical guy. But Dricus du Plessis is a full, well-rounded mixed martial artist. Now, it is true that he started out his martial arts career as a kickboxer, but in reality, his body was built like a wrestler, on top of the fact that he is a seasoned striker due to his amateur pedigree in the Muay Thai world. But in reality, what Dricus is a full-time MMA fighter, not a part-time or not a transitioner of any sort. What he is a guy that started out with the intentions of doing full MMA. And it sort of is highlighted in the way that he trains. You see, you got to understand the extreme training that a mixed martial artist goes through, I think is really way higher than the type of training that you would do if, let's say, you are a boxer. Okay, I think with boxing, there's a lot of aerobic. There's a lot of aerobic mechanisms that you're working on with boxing. So in other words, you can do this all day. Literally, this right here, I could do this all day. Watch, I could do this while I'm talking to you at the same time, right? This is what boxers do on a daily basis. Now, with mixed martial arts, you add the kicks, you add the punches, you add the uppercuts, you add the elbows, you add the knees, and then you add the clinches along the way, right? You add all of these things, and then you add the takedowns, having to switch levels. When you're switching levels, right, you're constantly going up and down in this position. Why? Because when you're in this level, you're trying to get ready to punch and kick. But when you're at this level, you're trying to shoot down low in order to either grab a hold of your opponent's leg or catch whatever is there to initiate a takedown or get up close range in a tie-up position. All of this takes anaerobic mechanisms of your body. So as a result of that, there is a demand for a higher intensity of training, and that would include certain aspects of hill sprints while doing it with weights, certain aspects of heat exhaustion while training under those conditions, increasing your O2 max level. So for the guy that was at the gym that was saying, well, I don't understand why you're throwing punches or you're shadow boxing in a sauna, I gotta tell you, stuff like that works, okay? It increases your O2 max level, and that's just what it is. It's a proven fact, and Dricus is doing it, and now we're seeing it in the way that he implements that in his fighting. Again, it doesn't look like the most crisp style there is, but by the end of the day, it works for him because mixed martial arts is not just about doing things the right way in a traditional boxing sense, doing things the right way in a traditional wrestling sense, or doing things the right way in a traditional jiu-jitsu sense. MMA is its own sport and its own rules, and as a result, for whatever reason, Dricus du Plessis had been able to figure that out through his level of fitness, his genetics partially, and then on top of the fact that he has a brilliant coach that has came up with a great game plan. And again, here's something you got to understand. All combat sports, including bare knuckle boxing in the current moment of time, is still in all of its infancy. Whereas with, let's say, with bare knuckle boxing, it has a long history that is being sort of revived as sort of like this old information that a lot of people don't know. Now, why is it that back in the days, they would hold their hands like this? Is there a reason for that? And I think there is, because if you're fighting under bare knuckles, right, you have a different padding as opposed to, let's say, a glove. With a glove, you can have a lot of padding by just doing this. But if you don't have a glove and you got your hands up like this, it's very easy to penetrate. That's why a lot of guys get away with more jabs in MMA than they do in boxing, especially if, let's say, you're a Max Holloway or a prime Nick Diaz type of jabber in that traditional sense, right? So once again, with MMA, it is not always about doing everything right. It is just being at the right place and at the right time. Okay, let me repeat that again. In MMA, it's not always about doing what is right or in a traditional, conventional sense, but being there at the right place and the right time. And when Dricus, being that he's a hard puncher, he was able to hit Izzy and then take him down and as a result finish him off the ground, right? But when he lunges at you, this is why being right or being wrong in a technical matter doesn't matter in this situation. the way that he was coming at him, it was as if Dricus was a walking Swiss Army knife. And what do I mean by that metaphor? Well, the way that he's swinging at you, it feels like he has multiple sharp weapons around him, and you can feel the imminent threat at it as it is closing near you, right? So when you see somebody wave around a Swiss Army knife at you, or a knife of some sort, you kind of anticipate and know that there is sharpness coming your way. That is how Dricus literally fools a lot of his opponents. And then not even to mention the fact that he has a lot of these mental games going on in terms of how he basically psychs his opponents into a different realm of mental instability. So Dricus has a lot going on the mental side. He has a lot going on the physical side. And this is the reason why he is undisputed champion today. And by the way, a very stacked weight class. I made a video on this channel. You can look it up on the catalog. It is called 185, the most competitive division. And you can even see some of the comments there saying something to the effect of, well, you don't know what you're talking about. It is literally the worst division. You want to know why they're saying that? For the simple fact that Israel Adesanya was taking over that division, dominant for a very long time. And as a result, they just decided, hey, you know what? This division means absolutely nothing because here's this kickboxer coming in here dominating everybody. Well, now Dricus nullified that notion. Even Strickland nullified that notion. We've had 3-4 different champions in a span of a year. So now you got to think to yourself, you know what? Maybe this is a very difficult and competitive division, but for whatever reason, Dricus du Plessis had been able to figure it out. He'd also been able to figure out the mental game of this particular matter, the matters of being able to, let's say, psych his opponents out and put them in a different headspace. He made Sean Strickland cry about his father. He made Izzy cry about his situation. Because here's the thing, one thing you got to understand, all of these are very traumatic situations, which means what? He's facing opponents with traumatic situations in their lives, facing destitution on top of possible abuse. So as a result of that, it's going to lend itself easily into the promotion, which again brings back to Dricus' style, which is what? Not always doing all the right things, but being at the right place in the right time. And he just happens to have an opponent that claims he's not a real African champion because of his race or his ethnic background that is very much contrasting to the majority of what most Africans look like. But as a result, it's one of those situations where it caused sort of a racial division, right? And again, whether you like it or not, fights like that sell. They do. And this one sold just like the Conor McGregor and the Khabib fight sold. Anything that deals with this particular matter, Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia sold, and that had black on brown crime all over it. So this right here is a culmination of all that. And not only that too, Sean Strickland, lended himself into that situation because we know that he's just messed up in the head, and we know why he was able to take advantage of that. Now, why is it that others were not able to take advantage of that? That is the question, right? It's not like it's the first time Sean Strickland's opponents have ever brought this up. Look, I'll tell you why. It's a little bit different when Dricus has an accent. He sounds different, and because of that, unfortunately, we underestimate them. And this sort of goes into a little bit of a life lesson, right? A lot of people who, let's say, don't speak English or anything like that, oftentimes, I can tell you from an American-centric mind view, right? Many people underestimate their intelligence because they don't speak the language. But maybe, did it ever occur to you, if they know if you know their language and you knew exactly what they were saying and the information behind what they were conveying, I don't know. I think you would have a different opinion on that matter, wouldn't you? But the fact that we sort of semi-understand him, and the fact that he does have an accent, it does make people underestimate him to a certain degree. And because of that, I think that they really underestimate the type of mental anguish that he could lay upon you. Because look, here's the thing. It's one thing to convey a message. It's one thing to know an information about a person that could absolutely break them down. But in reality, it's another thing to deliver it in a way that is surprising, and the timing of it. And that, I think, is the important aspect that we need to learn from this, is the timing. What exactly do I mean by timing? You can insult someone, say bad things about someone, or hit someone, or assault someone in any time of the day, right? But when you do it and how you do it is going to be predicated on whether you either knock them out or, in the verbal sense, really hit them home. For example, Eminem in 8 Mile, how was he able to win? Well, he was able to win because he had already dissed himself in ways that would make the other person have a hard time responding. Okay? So that's timing right there. Had he done that, let's say in the beginning of the quarterfinals of that rap battle tournament, maybe it wouldn't work. But it worked for that point, and it worked for that guy, and specifically for the subject matter that he knew about his opponent. But it would not have worked at any other time. And that right there is Dricus in a nutshell, in the way that he promotes his fights, in the way that not only he goes and gets into the mind of his opponents, but also the timing of when he brings up these certain things. Now, when he brought up Sean Strickland's dad abusing him when he was younger, right? He did it in front of a crowd, and let me tell you why that's significant. Sean Strickland likes to believe that he is one of those people that really doesn't care about what anybody else thinks, right? That could be far from the truth, because at some point we all care what people think, and then when you reach a certain level, you reach a certain followers, and you reach a certain amount of clout, it becomes a drug and addictive, and sometimes really alters your personality into playing up that role. Even though, if let's say you are more of the mature version of yourself, people still want you to be portrayed as, let's say, Triple H in his younger days, as opposed to Triple H now as the CEO of the WWE. But nonetheless, that is what we have going on, right? The mental mindset of Dricus, the physical limits that he takes himself during training, all of these factor into the reality of why right now he is the best 185er in the world. Because, for one, the unpredictability, again, we talked about the technical aspects of his skills, right? There's unpredictability there. It's hard to time it. And once again, even with trash talking and bantering and things of that nature, all of that has to have, the right timing. He has that. He has the right timing, both verbally and physically. And he has the right tools, the right team behind him. And here's another thing, too. I think a lot of people really overestimate training in a well-known gym. Now, look, here's the thing, right? I've trained in both well-known, MMA gyms and well-known MMA gyms. I can tell you the ones that are not as known are probably more than likely going to give you more details to attention. Whereas with the bigger gyms, they got 20 other fighters that they're getting ready for a fight with. And even if, let's say, you're a championship level fighter, they still have to have limitations on how they're going to deal with you or how they're going to help you out. But with Dricus and people like Leon, I think they tapped into something where, you know what, I'm going to be a homegrown fighter. But unfortunately for Leon, we saw the limits of that. And right now, as I end this video, I'd like to ask you to like and subscribe. Watch from start to finish to give you the best context and the best storylines of all MMA. And lastly, let me just leave off this video with a couple of mentions. Okay, the co-main event was great. Dan Hooker, his stock went up, whereas with Israel Adesanya's stock went down, and that's just the way that it is. And by the end of the day, I think that Dricus is doing all the right things right now. But as time goes on, somebody's going to try to figure him out, and maybe they do, and maybe if they don't, and maybe from here on he goes on to become the best middleweight ever, maybe bigger than Anderson Silva. Who knows? But in the meantime, like and subscribe. This has been my short report for this weekend's fights. Inshallah, I'll see you soon.